It's going to be Paige Doelling. So Paige Doelling is the NOAA Scientific Support Coordinator for the U.S. Coast Guard District, and she has been the NOAA SSC for coastal Louisiana and Texas since late 2013, serving as a Principal Scientific Advisor to the Coast Guard for oil and hazmat spill response and planning in the coastal zone. She works on science and preparedness issues at the Coast Guard Unit, Area Committee, and Regional Response Team levels, and serves as an instructor for NOAA's Science of Oil Spills and Shoreline Cleanup Assessment Technique classes. So I do not have a fun fact for Paige. Maybe she can share one with us.
Oh, what is a fun fact?
Oh.
Gosh,
Hobby?
okay, here's what I do when I fly on an airplane. I knit socks.
Oh, she knits socks. Nice. There you go. Thank you.
I will have your little...
Okay, let me move this because everybody's taller than I am. Can y'all hear me? And those of you who are kind of lurking outside the door, there are seats right up here up front and nobody bites.
Yes.
There's a couple right over there. So as Monica said, I'm the Coast Guard, I'm the NOAA Scientific Support Coordinator here for District 8. I cover Louisiana and Texas, along with my assistant Steve, who is here somewhere. Maybe he stepped out to take a call. And I will say that it's a busy place, and I'm really excited to look at this room because for a scientific conference I see a real big cross-section of responders and state folks and federal folks, and that really is what a response looks like. So these are just a few pictures of fun things that the Gulf has brought to me in my 3 short years here. I need a bigger slide because there's more pictures, but one point is that the NOAA SSC, not just oil spill, but also chemical spills. Those provide some of our more interesting cases because there's just a much broader variety of chemicals than there are oil spills. And that one up on the top is a chemical spill that happened in the Houston Ship Channel. So this is really like the take-home message. You can look at this slide and then you can take a nap, or Andy Turpak, who's seen this presentation 800 times, can come up and give it for me. But our job as the NOAA Scientific Support Coordinators, and this is actually a talk that is geared primarily to our responders, not necessarily to the research community, but our job is to help them do their job by informing their decision-making with good science. And that's a very short sentence, but there's a lot in there, because they're trying to do their job, they're trying to respond. And here in the in Coast Guard District 8, the coastal zone where a lot of the activity is, those responders are the Coast Guard. In the inland zone, it is the EPA. And the Coast Guard are responders, they're operators, that's what they do. So that is why NOAA supports them with science. The EPA also has scientific support coordinators, but they typically come from within the organization. Although we do work with them when they ask us. So anyway, that's the key point. So historical perspective and authority is that in 1976, a tanker vessel, the Argo Merchant, ran aground off of Nantucket. She spilled 7.1 million million barrels of a heavy crude, which those of you who have tried to clean up heavy crude know that makes a mess, and that's the one that takes a really long time to clean up. And there was a lot going on there. The Coast Guard FOSC, the engine room is back. So the Coast Guard FOSC was getting lots of advice. They were getting advice from within the government, from different agencies in the government, from folks in the state, from folks in academia, from folks in NGOs. And I kind of, in my thought, I refer to this as the moment when the FOSC had too many voices in their head. After that, sort of in the after action, one of the things that they realized was that they needed somebody within the response to help coordinate all of these scientific opinions, sort through them, and bring them to consensus and bring them to the FOSC. And at that point, the position of the Scientific Support Coordinator was born, and it was actually enshrined in the National Contingency Plan. Like I said, it's NOAA for the Coast Guard, and then EPA brings their own SSCs. And another really key moment in time, 1989, the tanker vessel Exxon Valdez ran aground on the Bly Reef, and really again released a huge amount of crude oil into a pristine environment. And this was the impetus for the Oil Spill Pollution Act of 1990, which is what all responses, or that all oil spill responses carried out under now. And that further developed the role of the scientific support coordinator. So Dave talked to you a little bit about NOAA structure and function. NOAA itself actually is a large agency. There's seven different line offices. Most of the folks that you see here come from the Office of Response and Restoration, which is under National Ocean Service. And we work across a continuum, which Dave referenced earlier. We have an emergency response division, which is the responders, is the SSE and our scientific support team. I'll go a little bit more into what those folks do. An assessment and restoration division, okay, which is the folks who come in towards the end and begin assessing the damage and preparing restoration plans. We have a marine debris division, and we also have a centralized disaster response center down in Mobile, Alabama, which is a Cat 5 facility designed for large regional events like Katrina or Deepwater Horizon. So we are the natural resource trustees for marine and coastal resources. That is those are carried out by two of our different line offices, National Marine Fisheries and National Ocean Service. And we serve, for those of you who know the structure of response, we serve as the Department of Commerce representatives to the regional and national response teams. And that is because NOAA belongs to the Department of Commerce, and we're the only agency there that has natural resources. Everybody else just has, like statistics and stuff like that. Nothing exciting. And one of our other line offices that is intimately wrapped into our response is National Weather Service. They provide a lot of the information that we use to do the modeling that we do for the response, and also often will provide on-scene meteorologists if we need them for larger incidents. The continuum of response for OR&R, like I mentioned, the key thing here, if you will, and I'm gonna walk around a little bit, is that the first thing that you have is response. The oil is spilled in the water, and this is where the emergency is. We want to go out and we want to clean it up as quickly as possible, because the longer you leave it out there, the more of a mess it makes. But across the continuum, this is across hours. Restoration and recovery may take years to decades. Hopefully response doesn't take years. There are a few spills which shall not be named down here in the Gulf of Mexico that have taken years, but oftentimes the response is, sometimes it's just days, sometimes it's weeks, it may run into months. But across that continuum, we start, the Emergency Response Division is the one who comes and supports the Coast Guard during active response. We coordinate with our Assessment and Restoration Division and the other federal agencies and state agencies who are responsible for natural resources, and move across that all the way to that restoration and recovery. And that's kind of where Dave was going when he was talking about the information that we developed in the damage assessment for the NRDA for Deepwater, and how we feed that back into response. So the scientific support coordinators are spread out throughout the country. There is approximately one per Coast Guard district. Some districts are special, like District 8, and we have 3 of us down here right now, including Adam, who gets to cover the vast inland area of rivers and lakes where we have lots of barges and Bakken spills. And so if you are not from the Gulf of Mexico, I may not be your SSC, but go find them. You will like them. They're all nice folks. When we are supported by a home team, our scientific support team, they don't always stay at home. Sometimes they come out and hang out with us in Seattle, and they are really the backstop. The SSC, the key point and part of that, actually all of those letters really matter. It's science. Response science is science. It's very science-based. And support, so we are bringing support to the Coast Guard, and coordinators. And that C part is very, very important, because as Dave mentioned, it's not just NOAA science. It's all the science we have out there, including often things that you wouldn't necessarily classically think of response. If they help us solve the problem and solve it quickly, we're going to wrap those pieces of science in. So the home team in Seattle, we've got some oceanographers who specialize in oil spill trajectory modeling. We have biologists who specialize in oil spill response, shoreline cleanup assessment technique, and related tasks. And we have some chemists who are specialized in response. They actually build a lot of the tools that we use. But with that said, even though the fact that they are highly specialized in response, they do extensive research developing products and guides to support the response. So it's not just a tiny group of people, it's a large outreach of people, and we're very excited with the amount of research that has come out of Deepwater, because there is so much information there that we could not have had otherwise that we are feeding into our processes. So the SSC on response, what I do, for those of you who are familiar with ICS, is I'm on the command staff. So I work with, there's a group called Environmental Unit that is responsible for doing all of the environmental plans and preparations and advice to the operations. And the rest of that command staff, that command, is operations. So my responsibility, what's most important to you guys here, is that first bullet, which is seek consensus on scientific issues. My team will provide trajectory, resources at risk, and product hazard information. So what's out there, what do we care about, what is it gonna do? When you have an oil spill, something bad happened, and things are not particularly at that point good. So when you are trying to clean things off, you have to make some decisions. We call those environmental trade-offs, and we will help the agencies and the RP technical staff within the command post assess those environmental trade-offs and make the best possible decision based on science, and provide that information to the FOSC so that they can begin to implement it. We'll help develop cleanup endpoints and methods. We also facilitate some consultations, ESA consultations, and RDA activities. That's a part of our coordination C. We're not doing that directly, but we're working with the other folks in our agencies who do those things, and making sure that they get the correct information and that information is also fed into the response. So this is one of the other key pieces along with that consensus is framing and scaling the problem. Looking at the magnitude, looking at the risk category, helping pick out response options, and figuring out where the oil or other chemical is going to be. Is it in the water? Is it in the air? Is it on the surface of the water? And this is kind of the very first cut when I get the phone call from Commander Denning, and she says, "Paige, we have this spill in this location. What are we worried about?" And it's like, well, that one, it's going downriver. It's going to float, and you should look here. It's at a very gross level. That's the first thing that we do. So that's the framing and the scaling. Is it a big problem or is it a small problem? We had another case where there was a barge that overturned in the Mississippi River on a high flow event last time, and about this time last year. And the question was, what are we worried about? And that one, that's pretty soluble, it's not very toxic, and you're really much more concerned about whether or not that barge floats into the body and carries it away. So the analytical framework, these are the questions that they ask us, and we step through what happened. What was the incident? Is it a deep well blowout? Is it like Deepwater Horizon? Is it a barge that overturned? Is it a pipe that is leaking? Where could it go? That's the next thing. Okay, now we need to deploy our resources. Where are we going to look? What could it affect? What birds, what fur-bearing mammals, what marine mammals, what sea turtles are in that area? What harm could it cause? Depending on what the type of oil it is or what state it's in at that point, what effects are we going to be looking at? And then the important point that all of these lead up to is, what can we do to help? Can we boom it? Can we skim it? Can we just try and shovel it off the beaches? Is it better to divert it to a sand beach than to let it go in the marsh? Those sorts of questions. So the SST and response, I don't know if Gary's here, your hero photo is up here. That's Gary, he's right back there. He's one of our folks, one of our biologists on the scientific support team doing recon during Deepwater Horizon. We bring trajectory specialists, resources at risk specialists, scout coordinators, oil spill aerial observers, and weather forecast specialists, and we will reach out through our staff and our contractor staff and throughout NOAA to bring in whatever other kind of specialist might be necessary. We don't always have them as part of this active standing SST, but that's the coordination. We find you what you need. So that SST, when they're not responding, and I will say that I call them pretty frequently, we keep them busy. They work on building oil spill response tools. ADIOS, which is an oil fate and weathering tool, NOAA, which does the oil spill surface trajectories and is now moving toward a 3D trajectory, and Cameo, which does chemical hazard evaluation, along with a number of other ones, including something called CAFE that looks at fates and effects, and that's based on the EPA Ecotox database information. And that's really slick. If you guys can find it, I know I'm talking to the right audience. It will generate your SSDs for you, so you can determine which word. So this is an important point, information synthesis and job aids, and this is one of the things where lots of times we'll get questions from the research community. Well, how come you didn't use this information? Or how come you didn't take into account the information in my specific paper? And a key point there is what I like to call information evolution. So when you guys do, okay, 3 minutes, I'll talk faster. I think we're doing it. So when you guys do your research, you get data. And then as you take that data and you combine it across a bunch of other papers and you begin to see commonalities and causes, is it causative or correlative, you begin to step it up to the level of information. So that you have, it's not just an isolated incident, this is what drives this is how we know. And then these guidelines that we put together based on all the information that is out there, that is knowledge. So in the case where we have an oiled marsh, what will we do? Well, based on all the information that we have looked at and the years of experience that we have, you can do this, that, or the other. And that is what they need to implement their response. So if what is going on seems to be counter to what it is that you think your information said, it isn't always. It just may not be specifically correct for that site or situation. So we work, and here's a key point I want to make for you all. We work not just in response, but we work very closely in the planning and preparedness groups. We work with the area committees, we work with the RRT, this is alphabet soup, the regional response teams, the joint response teams, and the national response teams, putting together geographic response plans and ecological risk assessments. This is where you get your science in on the ground. In terms of things that would be interesting, questions that you may have, things that you have found that might feed into how we implement strategies in particular locations. Because this is the time for thinking, and the response is time for doing. And one of the key points I want to make here, in addition, is that because in the response objectives always, the first objective is public and responder safety. And the second or third objective, depending on where you are, is minimizing and mitigating environmental damage. I would just note that although it's very important to do oil spill response science, it's not typically a response objective. So if very early on in the initial incident you come in and say, can we go out in the middle of your site and sample? And I say no, that's because of safety concerns typically, and making sure that the operation is conducted efficiently. It doesn't mean we don't like you, because we do like you, and the research is very important. But taking into account those primary objectives is really important. So, and the last thing that we do a lot of training. I see a lot of folks who've been in my training. I see a lot of folks who help give my training. We do 4 science of oil spills classes per year. And the next one's coming up in Mobile in March. And we just finished out one or maybe the next one is in Charleston. My timeline might be wrong. And then we also do shoreline cleanup assessment technique classes. So if you're interested in those, contact us or check the website, and we'll be happy to see you there. And I think I have 30 seconds.
Yes.
So there's some phone numbers. But we are, if you check the website, you don't have to copy it down, all of our contact information is out there.
Great, thank you. There's still some